Do you know how many starting quarterbacks are projected to be out in the most important week of fantasy football? Not only that, but second stringers as well. So there's going to be massive shakeups here for week 17 of the wide receiver position. But before we get into the rankings, I just want to tell you guys this will probably be the last video I'll make before the Christmas holiday season. And the last time you'll see me this season is probably going to be after the Monday night game, where I will post my official what I got right and what I got wrong best takes of the 2025 season. So make sure to keep up with me in the offseason over at Dynasty Roundup. I also am going to be creating a golf channel in all likelihood that you could follow me on as well. And really quick, a shout out to my X account, which you guys need to be following. Now let's get into the first tier, and we've got Puka Nacua at number 1, JSN at number 2. Really, there's nothing to talk about. These two guys have been the most two dominant receivers in the game. They both have favorable matchups. Puka going to Atlanta on Monday night to take on the Falcons, and then JSN at Carolina. These guys are locked and loaded in your lineup. Jamar Chase at number 3 in the same tier because he takes on the lowly Cardinals. This matchup doesn't get much better. Like, last week was the only week a dominant number 1, Drake London, did not take advantage of that matchup. And that was because of his first game being back from the injury. At this point, Jamar Chase is a tier 1 guy with the way Burrow is playing. And I think T. Higgins being back definitely helps out Jamar Chase as well. Now, dropping down to that next tier, this tier is important to know because I'm not projecting necessarily that each team's wide receiver 1 and 2 are going to be this high in the rankings this week. But CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens are my 4 and 5, and that's because they get the Washington matchup. That defense has been atrocious this year, particularly from the passing game perspective. So there's just a major weakness here. It's also going to be a game where Washington has, in all likelihood, their third string quarterback playing. So you just know Dallas is going to run up the points on the Commanders. I don't think that both of them would be great, but I think both of them have a chance to be great, and that's why they're back-to-back at 4 and 5. T. Higgins at number 6 versus the Arizona Cardinals. Again, not that I think that Cincinnati will have 2 top 10 receiving options this week for fantasy football, but I think it's very possible. I mean, the way T. Higgins is playing, he's kind of become a low-key touchdown lock on a weekly basis. And the guy came back from the injury last week, was dominant against the Dolphins defense. I expect what could be a very similar outcome against another weak defense. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown's at 7, while Jameson Williams is at 8. So Amon-Ra and J-Mo, they're both playing on Christmas, I believe. And Amon-Ra is questionable as of the time of this filming. He did not practice on Monday. Couldn't find really big details on the injury because you look up Amon-Ra St. Brown on Google and the news is completely dominated by the whole touchdown. Did he get a touchdown? Did he not get a touchdown thing? So Amon-Ra St. Brown, I'll just assume he plays because he's a tough SOB. The matchup I don't love this week for either one of these guys. And honestly, this is one of the few offenses that can put up 2 top 10 wide receiver performances in the same week. I just don't know how I think about this matchup as a whole. So I'll put it to the test. I'm going to go to fsroundup.com, my site, and put up a start-sit poll for Amon-Ra St. Brown versus Jameson Williams. So I'm going to type in Jameson Williams, then I'm going to go to chat, and I'm going to go to start a poll for week 17. And I'm going to add Amon-Ra St. Brown in there, and I want you to go vote on this. It's free to vote, free to start your own poll, and this is going to be a major key for many people setting their lineups this week. And if you want access to my top 300 rankings this week, you want a free trial to run with the automatic waiver tool, which is winning people leagues this year. You want access to the comparison feature and the league sync-up feature. You could do that with a premium subscription at fsroundup.com. Once again, I think it's a good idea for you to get this free trial going so you can see how much value the automatic waiver tool in particular is going to bring you. So the next year when the season starts, just sign up for the entire season. I know you'll get value out of it, and this offseason, if you wanted to stick with it, you could get access to my top dynasty rankings all throughout the offseason as well. Now, dropping down to our next tier, we've got Chris Olave at 9 and Drake London at 10. Now, Chris Olave, I think I could hear a lot of people in my head before I even put this video out there saying Chris Olave belongs at least in tier 2. I can understand the argument. He's at the top of tier 3 for very good reason. Like, this guy has been awesome. The only concern that I have at this point is his health. Like, he has looked healthy, and that's kind of why I'm ready to commit, and the matchup is obviously great. And I will say this, Tyler Shough has looked excellent. Like, that guy made me look dumb when I said that he belonged behind the deli counter. I think that Chris Olave has a good quarterback situation this week and a great matchup as well. Drake 1-10. You just kind of wonder about the injury concerns with him, the way they used him last week, and if they're just going to kind of shut him down a little bit. Not shut him down in the sense that they won't play him, but just in the sense that they won't give him as much volume as he was getting early in mid-season. I mean, it is at that point. They have nothing to play for, although the matchup is excellent, so I do think he is a top 10 guy for me this week. Mike Evans at 11, and A.J. Brown's at 12 to round out this tier. Mike Evans at Miami, I just can't not take advantage of the matchup. Like, that's really what it comes down to with Mike. And last week was good, but he only got a good week because of the touchdown. So, like, I understand. Tampa is a bad place right now because Baker is not playing the same since Liam Cohen left the building, and it just hasn't worked out. But I just can't help but to think they're going to force feed Mike Evans at the end of the season. It's against a bad defense. It should be a matchup that you can take advantage of. And frankly, I just have more confidence in him than I do with other guys who are missing quarterbacks this week. A.J. Brown at number 12 going to Buffalo to take on the Bills. Again, I love the matchup. And at this point, A.J. Brown has felt over the last month and a half to be like a 10 target per game lock. And what he's doing with his targets is what A.J. Brown can do, which is excellent work. So A.J. Brown at this point, I kind of feel pretty confident having him over Devonta Smith like I did not have over the majority of the season. And depending on matchup, while this week is great, he will fluctuate in rankings. Not that it matters because it's the big week for fantasy at this point, but I will say this, I'm pretty confident in him this week for your fantasy championships. Dropping down to our next tier, we've got Nico Collins at 13 and Juwan Jennings at 14. Now, Nico Collins, this is kind of a tier where you're going to start to see some guys really rise up that wouldn't typically be here, but I actually don't love Nico this week. This matchup against the Chargers, I think it's a lot tougher than most people think it is. Like, the Chargers defense has been awesome this year, particularly over the last month and a half. With all their injuries on the offensive line, they've really made up for it defensively. And I don't think this is going to be a high-scoring affair. I think it'll be a lower-scoring game with a lot of field goals. So Nico, of course, is a dominant wide receiver one for his team, and he can make a big play anytime, which is why I can't rank him much lower than this, but having him in this tier is definitely a statement ranking. Make no mistake about it. Juwan Jennings at 14 versus Chicago. Matchup is excellent. Brock Purdy's playing awesome, and Ricky Pearsall is already down and probably won't be back. Now, here's the other thing. George Kittle is going to, in all likelihood, miss this game. I don't know for sure. Obviously, we just saw him get injured on Monday night, so maybe he's back. But what I'm saying is I do think if he's by himself, Jennings will have a good game. I really do think this is a good matchup to take advantage of. San Francisco and Chicago probably locked in a higher scoring game in this one, and it does feel like a Juwan Jennings type of game to me. DJ Moore, same matchup. I love the opportunity, and I'm assuming Rome Odunze and Luther Burden are out again. Now, I might be wrong. We'll see what happens throughout the duration of the practice week. But if that stands right now, I like DJ Moore a lot. We saw what he just did against the Green Bay Packers, a much better defense, and now he gets San Francisco. Give me that opportunity this week. Jacoby Myers is at 16, and Stephon Diggs is at 17. Now, Jacoby Myers goes to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. I think that matchup is awesome. I mean, we just saw San Francisco ripped the Colts defense to shreds. And it's really not because like they're not good. When they're fully healthy, I think they're much better than they are. But right now, they're just not fully healthy, and I don't anticipate that in Week 17. So I think at this point, Jacoby Myers, he's so clearly the wide receiver one. The only problem with him is that there's a lot of different options, and I actually think BTJ could have a really nice week this week too. But ultimately, I'll just put the wide receiver one on a winning team at number 16 against a bad defense. Stephon Diggs at 17. Another situation where I think that the Jets defense is so bad. Like, it's just embarrassingly bad considering they have a defensive head coach. And on top of that, Kayshon Boutte expected to be out because he's in concussion protocol again. So I do think Diggs, you kind of saw a couple weeks without Kayshon Boutte earlier in this season, that was when Diggs had his most consistent moments. So you can kind of expect that, I think, this week out of Stephon Diggs, especially in a really good matchup. Devonta Smith is at 18 to round out the tier, and I still love the opportunity for Devonta Smith. Because the thing is, I think that we've found out over the last month and a half with A.J. Brown's dominance is Devonta Smith is still involved. Now, it's kind of dependent on if he hits a big play or not. He's definitely a riskier play, but I like the matchup so much that I ultimately just do not think that Devonta Smith won't have a good game over some of these other guys, once again, who are just missing quarterbacks this week and or in bad matchups. This is a great matchup. I'll trust Devonta Smith to a certain point. Dropping down to our next tier, Christian Watson is at 19 and Courtland Sutton is at 20. So Christian Watson versus Baltimore, I love that opportunity in the matchup, and I actually think it's going to be a good week. I think Jordan Love will play. We'll find out if he does ultimately throughout the rest of the week because they are playing on Saturday, so make sure to stay tuned. But if he does play, I think Watson's in a good position here because they're dealing with injury, I think, to Romeo Doubs and I think also to Dontavian Wicks. So in theory, like Watson has already been the wide receiver one. You can imagine that he'll get a bunch of targets kind of honed in on him if there's more receiving options out of this game. So you give me Jordan Love. I like the matchup. I like Watson to a point this week. Courtland Sutton at 20 at Kansas City. This matchup, man, I would like to say is fantastic because Kansas City's done with. But at the same time, like they still do have good secondary play for the most part. So I don't love Courtland Sutton as much as I would like to this week, and maybe I'm wrong because Denver is definitely going to win this game. It's on Christmas Day, and you can expect them to put up a lot of points on Kansas City. I just don't know if it's going to come from the passing game, and if it does, I think it might go more towards Troy Franklin this week, who will be in the top 30 later on in these rankings. Now we've got Michael Wilson at 21 to round out this tiny tier right here, and he's going to Cincinnati to play the Bengals. So we saw what happened when Marvin Harrison Jr. came back in the lineup, and it was basically still Michael Wilson's wide receiver room. Now, Michael Wilson didn't have the greatest game. He had one touchdown to save the day for him, but it wasn't the dominance that we had been seeing. And that was a great matchup, so that was disappointing. Ultimately, my trust goes in this kind of matchup against Cincinnati's awful defense, and I just think that Michael Wilson, it kind of reminds me of, it kind of feels weird to say this, because he's been so bad lately, but it reminds me of Emeka Egbuka, where Egbuka, really up until last week, had held basically 7 to 10 targets per game, even with the return of other receivers. Michael Wilson, what he did for them in Marvin's absence, you can't take it away from him. And I don't think you can take it away from him when Marvin is back, and that's why I prefer Michael Wilson at this point over Marvin in fantasy. Dropping down to our next tier, we've got Ted McMillan at 22 and Jalen Waddle at 23. Now, Ted McMillan, in theory, like you could definitely see him having a good opportunity here because he's always the wide receiver one. So it feels weird to put him this low, but he's playing Seattle. And I said this yesterday when I was going through defense and kicker rankings. I think there's going to be a blowout in this one. I think Seattle coming off a really big win. They need to keep winning. They're going to crush the Carolina Panthers, who are coming off a really emotional win. And I just don't think they're going to be able to handle it. So I really do think with the extra rest time for Seattle, they're going to take it to them. And I don't trust Bryce Young on a week-to-week basis to deliver the ball enough to Ted. So I think Ted probably is not the greatest play this week, but I still do think he's worthy of a top 25 ranking because he's the clear wide receiver one. Jalen Waddle taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in Miami this week. It's funny because I would have liked to rank him lower. I just can't. Against the Bucs defense, like if he was playing the Seahawks defense, for example, I would not have Jalen Waddle in the top 25. Might be in the top 30, but that's a hypothetical world I don't care to go down right now. I'm just saying the matchup here is too good. And there was an emphasis to get him the ball last week, even with as bad as Quinn Ewers was. Now, maybe it's Zach Wilson this week. I have no idea. All I know is that there's an emphasis to get Jalen Waddle the ball, and that's why I ultimately like him against a bad defense. Brian Thomas Jr. is at 24 to round out this tier, going to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. Once again, I like this matchup. And when we get in this last tier, I'll kind of be able to explain more why I prefer BTJ. Because BTJ is on a winning team. His quarterback is playing lights out like he's never played before since Clemson days. and I just want to take that opportunity against a bad defense. Last week, I predicted it right. He was matched up with Pat Surtain most of the way, and that's fine because they didn't need him. This week, I feel like it's going to be one of Brian Thomas Jr.'s best days in fantasy, but obviously, I'm not ranking him much higher than this because we know it's just been a bad year for him for fantasy football purposes. Dropping down to our last tier, we've got Ladd McConkey at 25 and Troy Franklin at 26. Ladd McConkey versus Houston, the matchup sucks. Bottom line, end of story. And I think Justin Herbert looked so great last week, and that can kind of taint people a little bit. I think Justin Herbert is a great quarterback. However, I also know Houston's defense is excellent, and he will see a lot of Derek Stingley. That's my problem. And so I don't think that Ladd's going to have his greatest day. Now, do I want him over other Chargers receivers? Yeah, I do. But I don't particularly want any of them this week. Troy Franklin at 26 at Kansas City. Like I said with Sutton, I actually think it could be a Troy Franklin week because Pat Bryant got hammered at the end of the game last week, probably will not play, and Troy Franklin's going to be the wide receiver 2 again. And whenever he's been the clear wide receiver 2, he's actually low-key been the wide receiver 1. So Troy Franklin, to me, is a major sleeper play. The only reason he's not above Sutton is because you just kind of trust Sutton as that wide receiver 1. But ultimately, I think Franklin has a really good opportunity this week. Olamide Zaccheaus, look at him go at 27 over Marvin at 28. Again, I'm operating under the assumption that Rome and Luther Burden do not play. So if Zaccheaus is in, give me the matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers. Olamide Zaccheaus has been low-key involved for the majority of the season until Luther Burden broke out. But if Burden's out, that means Zaccheaus is going to have involvement mostly in the slot. And it doesn't matter how you beat the 49ers through the air because any way you want to, you can. Phillip Rivers just explained that last night. So I do think Olamide Zaccheaus in good position this week. And then Marvin at Cincinnati, matchup is great. I just have no trust for Marvin. I really do think Michael Wilson is the better player. I do. Like, Marvin is not good enough to be this injured all the time. And he said it himself, like, I'm good enough to play, but I'm not obviously going to be fully healthy the rest of the season. He said that. I didn't say that. So Marvin, it's just like you see this matchup and you're like, oh my God, I want to take advantage of it. But then you just have to remember, Marvin has just not been good enough over a consistent period of time for me to have any more confidence in him than I do at 28. Adam Thielen is at 29. And Jaden Reed is at 30. That's how crazy this week's rankings got. Adam Thielen, if you do not know, DK Metcalf has been suspended for the last 2 games of the regular season. So that means Adam Thielen, in all likelihood, I'm projecting will step in as that number 1 receiver for Aaron Rodgers this week. Calvin Austin also injured. So you're going to see Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Adam Thielen, and probably some Scotty Miller. Adam Thielen, in my opinion, probably going to take the majority of the targets against them. I think Cleveland is not a great matchup as is, and I don't trust the Steelers offense to do great this week without their over-the-top threat with DK. So kind of worried about this one, but I ultimately think I'd rather go with Thielen than Terry with a quarterback 3, or Zay Flowers with a quarterback 2 or quarterback 3, Justin Jefferson with a quarterback 3. That's the way I see it. And then Jaden Reed at number 30 versus Baltimore. Once again, the matchup is great. And if it is Jordan Love, I'll take him over those other guys that I just named. So let me know what you think of the rankings in the comments below. And I appreciate all you guys being here all season. Love you guys. If it's the last time I see y'all, have a great offseason. But make sure to please check me out on my Dynasty channel and my golf channel, and I will be back for the ultimate what I got right and wrong for 2025. But if you want to see this week's top 12 kicker rankings, click on this video right here.